now have 9 justices who sit on the Supreme Court, with yesterday swearing in of Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court to replace the late Justice Antonin Scalia. This was Justice Anthony Kennedy yesterday at his official swearing-in ceremony.
As Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States.
As Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States.
Under the Constitution and laws of the United States.
Under the Constitution and laws of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Now, Gorsuch swearing in followed 20 hours of bruising hearings in the Senate Judiciary Committee and a partisan fight on the Senate floor, which required Republicans to trigger the so-called nuclear option to confirm Gorsuch with just a simple majority and without any Democratic support, as opposed to the 60 votes traditionally needed to move forward a Supreme Court justice. Of course, now this move will also allow Trump to pick a future nominee that will tilt the court even further to the right. Trump relished his first victory as president.
I've always heard that the most important thing that a president of the United States does is appoint people, hopefully great people like this appointment, to the United States Supreme Court. And I can say this is a great honor. And I got it done in the first 100 days. That's even nice. You think that's easy?
Wow, just patting himself on the back. Hope he doesn't break his wrist. Christian, what do we already know about Neil Gorsuch? Potentially, how would he rule when it comes to, let's say, this Texas voter ID law?
You know, we review every Supreme Court nominee that's put forth. We look to see whether they are qualified and whether they have a record that demonstrates a profound commitment to the Constitution and to fair interpretation of civil rights laws. And we could not find that Judge Gorsuch met that standard. I presented testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee during Judge Gorsuch's hearing, and one of the areas that I really highlighted were his cases in the criminal justice context. There he has a really narrow view about constitutional rights of criminal defendants, a real narrow view of the Fourth Amendment. He's somebody who brings a strong law enforcement perspective to bear on cases in that context. It was, very interesting to hear him talk about his protocol being to look at individuals as individuals, that he doesn't bring with him a perspective. But in the law enforcement cases, he's somebody who sympathized with cops. He often granted immunity to cops in cases involving use of excessive force against victims. And he often talked about how cops are a community that often has to make quick judgments, and was very deferential to cops because of the sympathy he harbors for law enforcement in virtually all of the major criminal justice cases that came before him. So we're deeply concerned about his record and what that will mean for the major civil rights cases that will come before the Supreme Court in the road ahead.
All right, Kristen Clark, we certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
About 90 seconds left with our panel here. Look, bottom line is this here. You now have 4 hard-right Supreme Court justices. Yeah. You have a moderate, if you will, in Justice Anthony Kennedy. Then you have 4 liberal justices. But the reality is this here. What folks do when it comes to the ballot box will actually determine what takes place. You have the midterm elections coming up in 2018. You've got state races, gubernatorial races. So the real question is, will folks get out to vote to change the makeup of these legislatures? They're the ones that are passing these voter ID laws and voter suppression all across the country.
I think we clearly understand that elections have consequences. We're seeing that with the appointment of the Supreme Court justice and maybe 1 or 2 others. And I think on the local level, the same thing. And so if people are now not fired up to go vote, I don't know what else could happen in this country to make people understand you got to get out, you got to vote, you got to do your part.
I agree. And I think one of the things we saw, the 53% of white women who voted for Trump. And there's a problem with the electorate, not understanding the issues, not understanding the consequences. And they'll know when they start to try to overturn Roe versus Wade, a lot of those women will say, oh, that's how this works.
Well, I think that elections do have consequences, and one of the things we've seen over the last few elections is that the African-American vote has traditionally gotten higher and higher voting Republican. And that's, I think, a sentiment that shows that... Where? The national vote.
What are you talking about?
We got 3% increase over Romney and 3% more of that towards Trump.
3% increase where? 94% of black women voted against Donald Trump, and there was a 9-point gap between the black men and black women who voted for Mitt Romney, the same 9% when it came to Trump. That increase is not correct.
You're talking about African-American women. I'm talking about
No. I'm not talking about African-American women. There was a 9-point gap between black men and black women who voted for Mitt Romney in 2012. It was the exact same 9-point gap between black men and black women in 2016 with Trump. 94% of black women voted for Hillary Clinton. That was a higher amount than in 2012. What increase are you talking about?
You're talking about a gap. I mean, I'm talking about raw numbers, and we can you can look that up, and everybody will look that up on the internet.
There are raw numbers because there are more black people who voted in 2016 than 2012 because they were born. So, but you don't look at raw numbers. You look at percentages. The percentage did not increase.
Well, you look at the percentages, but I was saying that we have more...
You can't look at raw numbers, because if you have an increase in a number of people who are available to vote, that means you have more people, but if the percentage is the same, you don't have a bump.
Well, that's interesting you say you can't look at raw numbers, but, you know, people want to look at raw numbers when it comes to talk about Hillary Clinton getting the popular vote. So
I deal with facts.
We can look at raw numbers.
I deal with facts. If I have 100 people, if I have 100 people voting over here in 1 year, and I have 200 people voting over here, and then you say, well, more people voted over here because it was 200 people voting. I can't look at the number. I have to look at what is the percentage. If the percentage of 100 people is 9%, the percentage of 200 people is 9%, you did not have an increase.
Well, Roland, people do that all the time. You know, you can look at numbers or percentages.
Not on this show.
In unemployment rates, people use unemployment rates and percentages instead of raw numbers. People are retiring in larger numbers these years.
All right.
Is there, wait. Is there a point in here? Is there
reality
is this?
No, it's getting heated in here because it's supposed to.
Argue about numbers or percentages.
There was not an increase among African Americans voting for Donald Trump. The percentages were flat. Now, if you think that's going to help Republicans, knock yourself out. But I'm saying the numbers were flat. That wasn't an increase.
Well, you're talking about now just one election. I went back to Romney, and I went back to election prior to that. African Americans have voted.
Worse than McCain.
African Americans have voted more and more Republican than Democrat, and people can go to the internet.
Kellyanne Conway must have walked in while turning the facts here.
We can all look it up.
You can look it up, but I know these by heart. A peaceful protest turned deadly. 37-year-old black man was shot and killed by Baton Rouge police. His hands are in the air, and you still get shot by the cops.
Oh my God, please don't tell me he's dead.
We're not going to let hate define us.
Race is a big part of this.
If truly all lives matter, then all lives need to matter equally.
What we require is action. What we require is accountability. We understand that black lives do matter, and we will keep focused on this issue.
NewsOne Now, every weekday morning at 7 on TV1.